Hello everyone, back into today's second video, doing GWV Sunday Round-Up for today's second video. So this is your Sunday afternoon eclectic mix of this and that. We're going to be looking at things like solar activity, sea surface temperature, anomalies, Eurasian snow cover, the QBO, the AO, the NEO, and also the weather next week, 10 days as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. The first video released today was the third spring 2020 analogues update. So that's a bit of a QBO special. We think we're moving into the EC phase of the QBO. So we're looking at springs that had developing or strengthening easterly QBOs, and we're looking to see what those springs were like, because that's what we think is going to be taking place as far as the QBO is concerned for this spring, for spring 2020. So have a look at that and see what the upshot of that was. We're also going to have the ECFDF Meteo France and DWD long range update for you later on this afternoon. That'll probably be around 3-4 o'clock. And tonight we're going to have Ensembles Watch. We go through all members of the GFS Ensembles, see what they're all showing for the next couple of weeks. Will there be any signs of some colder weather? We shall see when we do Ensembles Watch, have a bit of a laugh at this evening. Right, so going on with the Sunday Roundup for you. I'm going to begin with this. So we're just over halfway point of winter 2019-2020 now, of course. So this is the reanalysis for the winter in terms of 500 millibar height anomaly. This reanalysis for the winter of 2019-2020 so far up to the halfway point, and it's about as zonal as it gets, really, this. So deep low pressure out in the North Atlantic towards Greenland and Iceland. Big ridge of high pressure across many southern and western, southwestern parts of Europe. Jet streams coming in from the Atlantic like that. So it is pretty much as zonal as it gets. Obviously, it's an unsettled winter, particularly so in the north and the west, close to that low pressure around Iceland, but all areas have had considerable rainfall through this winter so far, following on from what was a very unsettled spring and a very mild winter as well so far, with the winds coming up from the southwest. Over on the eastern side of America, it's also been mild due to this ridge of high pressure that we've had on the eastern side of the states, extending out into the Atlantic. Coldest weather really has been across northwestern parts of America and northwestern Canada, with this trough of low pressure just here. Otherwise, the jet stream been doing something rather like that. So both sides of the Atlantic, the eastern side of the of America and the western side of Europe, both sides of the Atlantic kept on the mild side of the jet stream so far during this winter. Of course, we've also had this big ridge of high pressure that has been a fairly consistent signal in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. Been fairly consistent, that ridge there in the North Pacific over the past few winters. We think that is associated a little bit with the warmer than average sea surface temperature anomalies that have tended to form off the coast of Alaska and the Pacific coast of Canada and North America, that sort of area. So that ridge has been a sort of a regular on and off type feature for the past few years, and you can see how western coasts, though, of America and Canada have been cold with a trough of low pressure, and then the ridge has been on the eastern side of the states and from many southern parts of Europe. So it's as zonal as it gets this winter so far, and of course that pattern is the reason we've had a very, very mild and also very unsettled winter up to this point. That's happened despite the fact it's a solar minimum winter. One or two people have asked me about the fact that it's solar minimum winter, but we're not getting a cold winter. Of course, we did explain in the winter updates, I think it's a 9th winter update, that solar minimum in itself is not a guarantee of a cold winter. Other factors are important. There is probably a time lag, actually, on being in its solar minimum and then having an effect on the troposphere and on the jet stream. So actually it tends to be the first couple of winters of the new solar cycle, so the first couple of winters after solar minimum, that have a greater chance of being cold. And that's not a guarantee either, because if something was to happen, like you got a super El Nino, then that would probably scupper those winters being cold on average as well. That happened in 97, 98. The winter of 97, 98 was one of the early winters of solar cycle 23. and would probably have been a cold winter, I think, because it had everything else going for it. It was an easterly QBO, had a tripole in the Atlantic. It was a winter just after a solar minimum. So it had everything going for it, really, the winter of 97, 98. But what it also had was a super El Nino. And so we finished up with an exceptionally mild winter, although it did get really cold in the spring of 1998. Anyway, the point is that there are no guarantees with the weather, and all factors are important, particularly for us in the northwest of Europe, because our weather is governed both by the Atlantic and also from the continent. So we've always got this competition going on, this battle for ascendancy between cold air to the north and east in the winter and high pressure to the south and to the west, which does make it very complicated for us in particular. But it's always those couple of winters after solar minimum that have a greater chance of being cold on average rather than the solar minimum winter itself. And we did explain that, I think, when we did the 9th winter update back in the autumn. This is the solar disk on our side of this today from solarham.net. So it confirms we continue to be at solar minimum. We've got a blank solar disk, no sunspots at all on our side of this today. So activity is therefore at very low levels and is expected to remain at very low levels for the next 3 days. This is GWV Solar Activity Tracker updated by good friend James Atquill up to today, the 19th of January. Big thanks to James sending this through. So the orange line is depicting each individual day's worth of sunspots. You see we're at a very low level of sunspots and have been since last spring, really, since this period just here. The odd day has had sunspots, but not many of them. Most days have actually been devoid of sunspots on the solar disk, and so you have these long stretches without any orange spikes. Just around the new year, we did get this little pop-up in activity. And those sunspots were quite interesting, but occurred around the new year because they were associated with sunspots for solar cycle 25. There's always an overlap from one solar cycle to another. So I don't think we're officially yet in solar cycle 25, but we are getting nearer to the beginning of solar cycle 25. It means that next winter, the winter of 2021, is likely to be the first winter of winter of solar cycle 25. So, few sunspots occurred around the new year. Now we're into another spotless stretch. You can see that from where the orange line is flatlining on the floor. Those sunspots that occurred around New Year were enough to lift our trend lines, the thick green and thick red lines, up a little bit. You notice how earlier on, back into last year, those trend lines, particularly the red line, was sort of flatlining on the floor of the chart. So that little spike in activity from solar cycle 25 sunspots was enough to lift those trends up a little bit. We also see solar fluxes lifted up a little bit. That's like the noise that's being emitted from the sun. From these sunspots. So we see that solar flux has also lifted up a little bit since around the new year. And it's all indicative of the fact that there have been a little bit of activity over the, or there was a little bit of activity around a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, but things are definitely still very quiet on the solar disk at the moment. We remain at solar minimum. Will likely be so for some time still to come. This is from our good friend Richard Traup. This is showing the current spotless stretch. So we are for 2020, of course we're very early on in the year, but so far for 2020 we have had 11 days without any sunspots. That's 58% of the year. We're only 19 days into the year though, of course. 2019 has 200 or had 281 days without sunspots. That's 77% of the year. Deep solar minimum. What you have to bear in mind though with this, of course, for 2020 is that sunspots have occurred have been primarily solar cycle 25 sunspots. But that again doesn't mean that we are into solar cycle 25. There's always an overlap from one solar cycle to another. And actually it is very difficult to pinpoint when you end one solar cycle and begin another solar cycle. At some point we'll get an announcement. I think it normally comes from NASA. We get an announcement telling us that we have officially, formally started the new solar cycle, and then we'll know where we're into solar cycle 25. 2018 had 221 days without sunspots at 61% of the year. I think it will be 2019 with 281 days, 77% of the year deep solar minimum. That will be the solar minimum year of solar cycle 24, and I think 2020 will be the first year of solar cycle 25, but it'll be exactly when we begin that new solar cycle. We're going to be doing Solar Sunday very shortly. It'll either be in February or March, depending on what time we have, but we will have Solar Sunday very shortly, and that could well be the last Solar Sunday of solar cycle 24, and then the next one that we do in the summer, that might be the first Solar Sunday of solar cycle 25. Big thank to James and Richard for sending those through. Now this is the re-analysis from the winter of 2007-2008. Again, just confirming the idea, because this was a solar minimum winter, or it was the winter just directly before the transition from one solar cycle to another, if you see what I mean. It just confirms what I was talking about, that these solar minimum winters themselves are not guaranteed to be cold. This one was another zonal winter. You see that it has this ridge in the northern part of the Pacific Ocean just here. It has a slightly bigger trough than this year. It has a trough of low pressure on the Pacific coast of America. It has a ridge on the eastern side of America, so probably quite a mild winter for eastern parts of the states. Deep low pressure around Greenland and Iceland. The difference with winter of 2007-08 to the first half of the winter of 2019-2020. Remember, we've still got half the winter to go, so this might actually look more similar if you have more high pressure during February. But the difference is that the winter of 2007-08 was a more anticyclonic winter, but the high pressure was always, or nearly always, sitting to our south and southwest and southeast. So it's a very mild winter. We bring in the winds from the west and from the southwest. It was just rather a drier winter compared to what we've had with this winter so far. There was one really quite cold spell during the winter of 2007-2008, and that happened I think just after the new year of 2008. Just for around a couple of days, the winds got into the east via a very, very, very short-lived Scandinavian high. We did have one bitterly cold day, but otherwise it was a very mild winter and a relatively dry winter as well, especially later on in February. Turned really dry with lots of spring-like days, but also offset a little bit by some colder nights. We then had a cold spring in 2008. I'm sure a lot of people remember that. It was one of the earliest Easters that it's possible for us to have. I think Easter occurred that year sometime around the 20th of March, about as early as Easter can possibly get, or almost as early as Easter could possibly get, and it was in fact a white Easter in many places with quite a bit of snow around. And cold weather stuck with us into April as well. Before then we went on and had a very mild May, and that was followed by a really atrocious summer. So you just never know with the weather. Just because you've had a very mild winter, it does not necessarily mean that you can't get some cold shocks as you go through into the spring. And in fact, I suppose sometimes it can be a case that if you've had a very mild winter, it might be a little bit more likely that you have a cold shock at some point into the spring. But then again, when you've had a very cold winter, very often that pattern can carry on through to the spring. I mean, the winter of 1979 was like that. After the severely cold winter of discontent in 79, the rest of the spring was pretty cold as well, with regular wintry outbreaks that happened in 1995, 1996 as well. So you just never know, really. Every year is individual and every year is different. But I thought we'd just begin with this because one or two people have asked me about that, having such a mild winter around solar minimum. But as I say, it's not a guarantee just because you're at solar minimum. It's not a guarantee to have a cold winter, and it tends to be, although other factors are important even then, but it tends to be the first winter or two of the new solar cycle, probably due to time lag effects on the atmosphere and on the jet stream. It tends to be those first couple of winters in the new solar cycle that have a better chance of being colder. And of course, that will probably play quite a big factor when we come to do next winter's winter updates, which of course will begin in September, and that will be with us much quicker than most people probably think. So September is when we'll begin the winter updates, winter of 2020, 2021. Right, moving on to the ocean. So this is how sea surface temperature anomalies were looking in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans last week. So this is the equatorial Pacific Ocean just here. So, of course, that's what the ENSO region, with the sea surface temperature anomalies across the equatorial Pacific from Peru in South America, just there, to Indonesia over here, the islands of Indonesia over there. Further north, we've got the North Pacific up here, and we've got the North Atlantic, of course, over there. That's how the sea surface temperature anomalies were looking when we did last week's Sunday Roundup. This is the very latest in terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies. So let's deal with the ENSO region. First of all, a little bit of cooling has taken place in the ENSO region over the past week. Again, that's how things were looking last week on the, of course they do this the other way around because it's American, so this is January the 9th, 2020. We would do that the 9th of January, 2020, but in America they do the dates the other way around. So that is the month first, January the 9th, 2020, that's last week. This is the latest, which is January the 16th, or the 16th of January, 2020. You can see that in the ENSO region, things have cooled a little bit over the past week, especially in this eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean. We're at ENSO neutral, I think. I just saw some mention about Modoki El Nino for this winter by way on Twitter. I'm not sure that we've had a Modoki El Nino. I don't really know anything about that. Normally it would be relatively warm through here and cooler just there, so that might be a little bit Modoki actually, but I think there's been an ENSO neutral winter more than anything, but on the warm side of ENSO neutral. Going further north into the Pacific Ocean, things have cooled down a little bit, or have continued to cool down a little bit in this northeastern part of the Pacific Ocean. So if we go back to last week, so let's see where we are on the tabs, we're just there. So if we go back to last week, that's how things are looking in the northeast of Pacific Ocean last week. This is how things are looking now. A bit of definite slight cooling, especially towards the coast of Alaska and Canada and North America, a little bit out into the deeper waters as well. So things might be starting to cool down up there. Of course, it'll be too late. Things are changing in that northeastern Pacific Ocean, part of the northeast Pacific Ocean. It'll be too late for this winter, but it may have impacts later on in the year. I think to the south of the actual Pacific Ocean, things have also cooled down a little bit in that area over the past week. I think there's been a definite expansion of these colder than average sea surface temperatures to the south of the actual Pacific Ocean. So overall, it looks like the Pacific is beginning to cool a little bit. Nowhere near enough to say that we're on the start of a cold event from the ENSO region. We're on the start of the landing, but I think both to the north and to the south of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, so around here and down here, I think both to the north and to the south of the actual Pacific Ocean, we have seen a little bit of cooling over the past week. Now, whether that will be sustained and will eventually go into a landing cold event later on in the year, we'll have to wait and see about that. But it's far too early to say that that's what's going on. But it looks like the Pacific is cooling down a little bit anyway, compared to where it was few weeks and months ago. In the North Atlantic, very little change. We still have this colder than average horseshoe shape of sea surface temperature anomalies from the North Atlantic down towards the coast of Africa. So again, it's like a reverse tripod. This is not a good signal if you want a colder winter. It's one of the things that's gone wrong with this winter from a colder perspective, because if you want it, if you want a cold winter, you want it warm really just there, and then you want it cool just here, and then you want it warm down there. So it's actually the reverse of that what got this year. It's cooler there, it's warmer through here, and then it's actually quite warm down here as well, but it's a bit cooler up there, so it starts getting a bit messy when you get down towards the tropics. But it's not a pattern that's particularly conducive for a colder than average winter. That it's like a reverse tripole, and combined with this warmer than average area of sea surface temperature anomalies that we've had in the northern Pacific Ocean, as well as being ENSO neutral on the warm side. I mean, if it can go right, it has gone wrong from an oceanic perspective for this winter, and we could see this when we issued winter forecast at the beginning of December. I could see that the oceans were not primed for a cold winter for Northern Europe, and so it has proven. There were other things that perhaps did suggest a chance of a cold winter, particularly the way the patterns had developed through the autumn, with that very wet autumn and quite wet November as well. But the oceans are one of the key drivers. The oceans are king, really, a lot of the time when it comes to the weather. Yes, the oceans haven't been particularly helpful to us for this winter to get a colder than average winter, to say the least. This is how the SOI is currently looking. This is the Southern Oscillation Index. So this is an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state within the Southern Pacific Ocean, in the South Pacific. When the SOI is in its, from the Queensland government, which is part of Bureau of Meteorology, I think. So when the SOI is in its negative phase, the atmospheric setup will be reflective of El Nino. When the SOI is in its positive phase, the atmospheric setup will be reflective of La Nina. You can see that we've been through January so far, we've been swinging between positive and negative. So we begin January in the new year with these negative numbers: 2nd of January -17, 3rd of January -7, for example. Then we went very positive though later on in the first week of the month. So the 6th of January goes up to +18. That's like the atmospheric setup reflective of the La Nina. 10th of January goes to +13, again quite La Nina-esque. Moving up to more recent days though, we went negative again. So we've got the 14th of January at -10, the 15th of January at -11, 16th of January -13, 17th of January -16, and 18th of January -18. That's atmospheric setup being reflective of an El Nino. And then finally, the last day that we've got is the 19th of January at +0.24, so virtually around ENSO neutral. While we're trading positive and negative numbers like that, it tells us that the atmosphere is swinging between El Nino and La Nina type setup, and when that happens we tend to find that we're around ENSO neutral, with neither sort of atmospheric state able to get a foothold, and that tends to be something that you'd associate with ENSO neutral. We've been on the warm side of ENSO neutral, and the way the SOI has been behaving is indicative of being on the warm side of ENSO neutral as well. Moving on to Eurasian snow cover. So this is how things are looking in terms of snow cover across Eurasia yesterday, 18th of January. So now most of Russia is covered. You'll remember that earlier in the winter, when we looked at this 2 or 3 weeks ago, Western Russia was actually snow-free. It looks like most of Western Russia is now filled up with snow, although this area just here is still snow-free. Also, much of northern Scandinavia is snow-covered as well, although southern parts of Scandinavia and also Baltic areas just here, where you would expect to be snow covered definitely by this point of the winter, those areas are snow free. So it's still struggling really snow cover, and many parts of Europe where you'd expect snow cover also snow free. So kind of like Eastern Europe, you'd expect many parts of Eastern Europe now, particularly places like Ukraine, to be snow covered, snow free there. Snow really just over mountainous areas, to be honest. So it's been a very poor winter from a snow perspective across many parts of Europe and also into west parts of Russia as well, which of course you would expect with this kind of setup, because you can see how the southwesterlies are sort of driving into Western Russia and Northern Europe like that. So with that kind of setup, you would expect quite a poor European winter from a snow cover perspective, and that's what we've had so far. QBO is showing signs of moving into its easterly phase. Of course, we've been waiting for this. This is from NASA. So on this chart, the blue areas are where we've got the easterly QBOs. The sandy browny coloured areas where we've got westerly QBOs. This line just here is all important. That's 30 HPA. That is like the beginning of the troposphere. So above that, we've got the stratosphere. This is 10 HPA, the area of the atmosphere that we look at for sun and stratospheric warming, for example. That's the very top of the stratosphere up there. This is going to be like down on the surface down there. So you can see how this blue area has been descending, but only very slowly and gradually from the top of this stratosphere down towards the troposphere. But we've kept over the past few months, these are the date scores, that's November, that's December, that's January, we've kept this sort of browny sandy coloured area just clinging on around 30 HPA. But in the past few days, we have actually seen a descent of the easterly QBO into the stratosphere. You can see that just there, the way that lighter coloured area has finally pushed down to and under 30 HPA. I'll zoom you in a bit closer to that. So let's see if we can zoom in and go over here. So you can see how that greeny coloured area, it's not yet blue, but the blue colours, which is like the proper ECQBO, that's still further up in the stratosphere. But you can see how this green sort of coloured area has pushed down into that 30 HPA level. Now, it's only been the past few days that that's happened, so it is possible that we might see the westerly QBO coming back again a little bit. If it does, we'll see these browny coloured areas appearing again around 30 HPA. But at the moment, it looks like the ECQBO has descended finally properly into the troposphere. So January 2020 could well be the first month of the easterly QBO. Arctic oscillation observed and forecast is looking like this. So black line shows where we've been with the AO, the red lines at the end where GFS ensembles forecasting the Arctic oscillation to go. Remember, it's just an index that's reflecting the atmospheric state, not driving anything in its own terms, just tells us what the atmosphere is doing. When the AO is in its positive phase, you've got low pressure up over the pole, you'll strengthen westerlies. When the AO is negative, have high pressure blocking over the pole, you'll weaken the westerlies, and sometimes that blocking will push cold air out of the pole and into the mid-latitudes. Had a very, very positive AO during January. This is the 1st of January just here. Look how positive he was at the start of the month. Went even more positive through the second week of January, if that's possible. But been a really, really positive AO month so far. It may well be a record breaker, this, when we get the final stats in for January 2020. It might have the most positive Arctic oscillation that we've ever seen. That's where we are right now, or certainly on record, let's say back to 1950. That's where we are right now. The NEO still very positive, not as positive as we were a few days ago, but still in very positive territory. GFS ensembles are generally forecasting the AO to stay positive right way through to the end of January and into the beginning of February. We have got one or two outlier members that go a bit negative with the AO by the start of February, but as I say, those are outliers. Most of these ensemble members are keeping the AO solidly positive. Been a long time since we've had such a positive AO winter as this, I think. The NEO looks very similar. So again, black line shows where we've been with the NEO. Red lines at the end show where the GFS ensembles are forecasting NEO to go. We are sort of weekly positive with the NEO. So through this winter, the NEO has been positive throughout. We haven't had any negativity of the NEO through this winter, unlike the autumn and indeed last summer and even the second half of last spring, where the NEO was consistently negative. But we got to the start of winter, same thing happened last year. The NEO went positive, it stayed positive throughout the winter so far. We are still weekly positive just there with the North Atlantic oscillation, and the GFS ensembles are forecasting us to stay in neutral to weekly positive territory for the rest of January and into the beginning of February. So we've got both indexes remaining in positive territory, albeit not as positive as they have been over the past few weeks, but both indexes are staying in positive territory, which tells us we're likely to see a continuation of zonality through to the early part of February. That doesn't mean it can't be cold, though. We can get ridges forming, and that's what we've got at the moment. We've got an area of high pressure that is delivering us some quite cold, frosty weather, but it's not true sort of deep Arctic or Siberian cold that will produce snow. That's the difference. These were GFS upper air temperature and precipitation ensembles. Next couple of weeks, red line is the 30-year upper air temperature average for London. Starting off quite cold at the moment. The next few days we'll see the upper air temperature lifting up to go milder than average. But because it's under high pressure, it may take a little while for the surface to warm up. By the second half of this coming week, it should be milder, but probably quite cloudy in all areas. And then beyond that, it looks like we keep the upper air temperatures generally on the mild side right way through to the beginning of February. And the difference, of course, is that the high pressure begins to break down. So precipitation-wise, for the next week, lots of dry weather for London, loads of dry weather coming up to the end of the coming week. But as we get through to the closing days of January into February, back in the rainfall spikes, it begins to turn more unsettled once again as the high pressure breaks down and drifts away to our south. Temperature anomalies from the 19th to 27th of January, milder than average for northern parts of the country, a bit cold and average down in the south. Not a particularly big deviation either way, but certainly northern areas do look rather mild in the week ahead. Precipitation anomalies very dry from the 19th to 27th of January, dominated by high pressure, and particularly England and Wales looking exceptionally dry in the week ahead. We finally get a chance to dry out from the deluge. Over in America, southeastern parts of the states are a bit colder than average. Northeast parts of states are milder than average, and then it looks like it varies really from state to state, with some areas colder and some areas milder than normal. Precipitation anomalies dry in the southeastern states, where we've established it's quite cold. Northeast parts of states look a bit wetter than average, and generally quite dry in these northern and western parts of America as well. That's how the GFS midnight run was looking for Wednesday. High pressure dominating weather, but just beginning to slip towards our west, allowing cloudier and slightly milder air to topple in over the top of the high. Then the high builds back in on Thursday, could deliver more in way of sunshine in the south and slightly colder temperatures to Friday in the weekend. Then the high pressure begins to break down. It's quite a slow process to break the high pressure down, but by the time we get through to Monday, 27th of January, a week tomorrow, we're back into wet and windy weather again. Tight packed isobars, so winds could be reaching gale force once more. And also quite wet as well. But it is mild. Winds are back in from the southwest, of course. We move up towards day 10, and we just keep it very unsettled, and that carries on into the extended range. These areas of low pressure pushing through right way through to month's end. Beginning of February, staying unsettled, really. We do try and build up a little bit of high pressure, but overall low pressure carries on barreling through from the Atlantic. So up to the early part of February, we remain really quite unsettled. This is the 6 o'clock run over GFS, the latest run that's been updating while we've been speaking. So Wednesday again dominated by high pressure. That carries on to Thursday. Then Friday the high begins to weaken in the north, still mostly holding on in the south. Into the coming weekend, turns more unsettled for all of us. Wet and windy weather returns as we move up towards day 10. Actually looking stormy there as we get through to Tuesday, the 28th of January. Severe gales up in the north, and bouts of heavy rain too. Now, the West Central had slowed down earlier on, updating the 6 o'clock run of GFS, so we'll just see if we can show you any more of this. So there we go, up to day 10, 29th of January, 6 o'clock GFS run. A little bit of a cold snap there. Winds just turning into the north very briefly, and then beyond that, just keep it unsettled really, with further areas of low pressure continue to move in from the Atlantic. Heights are trying to rise down in the south as we're going through towards the end of the month. So that is trying to get things a little bit milder and probably dry things out a little bit. But overall, we keep this Atlantic feed going right way through into the opening days of February. That's how we finish up the 6 o'clock GFS run on the 4th of February. High pressure is still to our south, low pressure is still to the north, so we remain broadly in this westerly type setup. GM looks like that, so high pressure dominates for the middle part of the week, then it gradually begins to weaken and break down as we get through into the weekend and the early part of the following week. Up to day 10, looking at very unsettled, low pressure dominating again, further bouts of rain and potentially a bit on the stormy side as well. ECM, same idea, high pressure is in control up to the end of this week, and then over the weekend breaks down next week, increasingly unsettled, very very mild for a time, but increasingly unsettled, with westerlies breaking through, showers along with spells of rain. A little bit on the cool side there by day 10, Wednesday the 29th of January. These are the options on the table within the ECM ensembles today for day 10, which is the 28th of January. From the Icelandic Met Office, 34 members of the ECM ensembles with low pressure over the country and bringing in west-south westerlies, so that's going to be very unsettled, of course. 17 with low pressure, just a little bit more towards the northwest of us, so it's a slightly milder scenario. But I mean, they're both unsettled. The only difference with them is that this scenario has us in a cold sector, so the cold front has pushed through, and we're bringing in sort of a northwesterly flow, whereas this one has us probably still in something of a warm sector. But of course, the cold sector would be on its way in very quickly. And either scenario is basically Atlantic dominated and westerly for day 10. So a definite breakdown of the ridge and into unsettled conditions by day 10. 2 weeks' time, which is the 3rd of February. All ECM ensemble members look like this. 51%, 100%, 51 members, which is 100%, have low pressure to the north, high pressure to the south. The westerlies continue, but again, it would be quite mild. CFS-V2 looks like this. These are 500 millibar heights breaking down to week periods. The first week period takes us from the 19th to the 25th of January. The coming week, high pressure dominates. Going to be mostly dry. Quite mild, but high pressure is in control. Week 2 is the 26th of January to the 1st of February. The ridge is starting to break down. It's slipping further south and southeast. Low pressure is coming back to the north. Back come the westerlies, and also the jet stream is coming back as well. Week 3 is the 2nd to the 8th of January. The ridge tries to hang on to the south and the east. Low pressure is desperately trying to break it down from the Atlantic, and by the time we get through to week 4, we are then back under proper low pressure conditions. Low pressure is barreling in off the Atlantic, and just looking really unsettled there in week 4, which is the 9th to the 15th of February, but probably on the mild side. And February itself looks like this finally, so 700 millibar high anomaly from the CFS for February continues to suggest another very mild month to end this very mild winter, with high pressure tending to be to our south, low pressure to the north, winds coming in from a west-southwest direction. Eastern America continues to look a bit cold, with this trough of low pressure possibly bringing some wintry conditions to northern and eastern parts of the states, but on this side of the Atlantic we remain on the warm side of the jet stream, and the high pressure sitting to the south drags up wind from a west-southwesterly direction. So a very mild month is being forecast by the CFS for February, whereas Eastern America actually looks quite cold. And then finally, precipitation wise, no signal, but you would expect another pretty unsettled month, especially in the north and west, with above average rainfall there. No, we don't want that up, we want this up, and then that one. So that's it for the Sunday Roundup for this week. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you would like to do that. And by the way, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Have to click the little bell icon thing as well to make sure that you are not unsubscribed by YouTube, because that can happen on occasion. I have had reports and seen reports where people have been unceremoniously unsubscribed from YouTube channels for no reason whatsoever. And the workaround with that seems to be to click the little bell notification icon when you subscribe. Not sure why that should be the case, but that's what I've heard. Anyway, so subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Right, that's it for Sunday Roundup. We'll do it all over again next week. Don't forget to check out the spring analogues. And coming up later on, we've got the ECM Metro France and DWD seasonal model update for the next few months. And then tonight, it's Ensembles Watch. That's all for now, though, and thanks for watching.